I'm about to call Jason to tell him that I finished editing our first podcast.
DVE, what's up, man?
Is this JM DeBoard?
Yeah, you know it. Yeah. Depends on who's asking.
Well, I have something special for you.
All right, man. I'm laying on me.
I got an edit done of the podcast. We're official, baby.
Right on. All right.
So I'll have to send you the link. You'll have to listen to it and get back to me.
Okay.
I'll be around
Yeah,
tonight
man, that sounds good.
if you want to call me back after you listen. We can celebrate.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, brother. I'm pretty pumped,
Yeah,
though.
so send it on over.
Sweet, dude.
Okay, bye.
All right, peace.
Yep.
Aha! Our modern Western culture places little to no value on the power of our nightly dreams
to inspire, shift, and reorganize our lives.
This podcast demands a deep reconsideration of
the role our dreams play on our path to a more vital
and meaningful life. The following is living proof
of the life-affirming power of dreams
to effect change
and redirect the trajectory
of our inner and outer lives. These
are the dreams that shape us.
Dreams that shape us.
Oh, man. That it was so righteous. Oh, my God. Yeah, man. I listened to the episode, man. I mean, that's just, it's righteous. It's right on. I'm tickled, man. I can't even come up with the word.
I know, dude. I've been giddy all day. I finished it last night before I went to bed, and I was just like, I want to call him before I send him the link.
Yeah, good setup. I like that. Yeah, man. That's going to be a hell of an opening episode. I loved everything you did with it, the commentary and the interludes and the music, and and it all just flowed together, man. So
I know, dude. I was pretty happy with it. I was like, dude, this is actually, it sounds so legit.
Yeah. And it's I listen to my share of podcasts, and the formats they use can get a little stale, and I like how we're bringing in this extra energy into the format, and just the way that everything flowed, and then you finding that song at the end, man. That thing is stuck in my head now.
I know.
And, what a perfect way to go out, man. So.
Yeah, I agree, dude. It's just like, I don't know. By the end of the whole episode in that song, it just felt like so good walking away. You're just like so energized. You're like, wow, dude.
Yeah. All right, man. We've got it. I think we have a format. I was thinking that I know two other people. Through Reddit, I've interviewed them. I can dig up their emails. One of them was a lady who had dreams about
Hello, this is Christian. Congratulations on the second anniversary of your wonderful podcast, The Dreams That Shape Us. It was a pleasure working with you in the preparation of the Always Run in the Directions of Your Dreams episode, in which we discussed my dream about my wife's passing. The interview was done with sensitivity, and friends and relatives of Suzanne appreciated hearing about the experience. They also expressed an appreciation for my dream practice, which was a bit of a surprise for me. I have long felt that the more that people pay attention to their dreams, the better a place the world will be. Your podcast contributes to such a better place. I wish you the best in all your future endeavors.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Dreams That Shape Us podcast. I am your co-host, Steve Arnenwine, and I am joined here by my prisoner in the dream. I dragged him here. My partner in the dream, Mr. J.M. DeBoard. What's up, brother?
And hey, brother, it's our anniversary. Did you remember?
Yeah.
Did you get me anything? Yeah.
You sent me something and I have not sent you anything.
Well, that was a Christmas present.
Yeah.
This is our anniversary.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're looking for an
time.
anniversary gift. Yes. So 2 years since we've put this podcast out. We're now about 30 episodes into it. And we want to do a retrospective on what we've accomplished to this point and check in with the people we've interviewed and give the listeners updates on what's going on with their lives and with us and the way that our dreams are responding to the ways that we are digging ever deeper into ourselves, learning more about ourselves through our dreams. And Steve, you had a dream. It might be a good place to start with this. You were getting ready for this episode and you had a dream about it. So, and you have not told me about this yet.
Jason's
so I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And real quick. We just wanted to, sit down and have a talk about, what the last 2 years has meant to us. And yeah, to kind of give you an idea of kind of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on and kind of like how this whole journey has gone for us. And it's like I got a few cool different things that I want to jump into here tonight with Jason. And we're going to have a few little snippets of audio from a bunch of the people that were on the show, giving a little bit of information about what it meant for them to speak their story so fully. And so I hope you guys enjoy this. So yeah, my dream. Have not told Jason this yet, just had it 2 mornings ago. It was a really unnerving dream, but a really beautiful one at the same time. It was kind of like one of those anxiety dreams. I have these often when I go to perform music publicly, where I'm like on stage and I forget everything that I'm supposed to be performing. Hate those dreams, but I guess they kind of like help me prepare for that. So this one in particular, the dream began. Me and Jason were going to be hosting a live version of this episode where we were actually at a brick and mortar place and we invited whoever wanted to come to experience our show live, which isn't even anything I've ever thought that this podcast would become. Who knows if it ever will. But it was really cool to see people. And a lot of people did actually show up. I mean, we had a packed room. It was probably at least a couple hundred people in there. And I was kind of taken aback by it. I was like, oh my God, like super shocked that this many people cared to come out to support us in this way. So it really shouldn't be a shock because it's kind of how I feel about, where we stand right now with the podcast. There's a whole slew of you that are just chomping at the bit for our next episode. I don't even have to post it on social media. So many of you are following it that, you must get the notification and you just drop everything you're doing right then and there. Because sometimes it's like, I'll check back at the analytics in like 15 minutes and we already have like 20 plays. And I'm like, oh my God, like I literally just uploaded that. So if you are among those people, thank you. Like seriously, thank you. So anyways, I'm up on stage with Jason. I'm feeling really unprepared. Like I'm feeling like I haven't totally thought through like how I'm going to do this episode, which is kind of how I feel right now. This is kind of like we're just kind of like freeballing it a little. That's a weird way of saying that.
Freestyling.
Yeah, we'll say freestyle. That's a little bit less graphic. So yeah, so that's how I felt in the dream. And I just get up there and I mean, I feel pretty confident at first. You know, most of these interviews, I kind of just let the story kind of surprise me. You know, everything's going great, and I'm just saying, you know, I'm really so grateful for all of the support. I mean, the amount of people that we have showing up to listen to these stories at this point is just really beautiful, and it's so touching to see how many people really truly value this podcast, and they're right there for us every time we release. It means so much to us, and I'm kind of going on and on this kind of wavelength. And I stop for a moment, and this woman stands up from her chair right in like the front row, and she approaches the two of us, and she has this T-shirt that she had made for us, and the one that she hands me has images of the Grinch on it, and I just get all cheesy, and I'm like, oh my God. And I can't remember the particulars about like what else. It looked like there was like words and stuff like written on the shirt, and I can't remember anything about what that was, but it just felt really meaningful that somebody had heard my personal story and appreciated the work that we're doing so much that, you know, she gifted me something like this. So that was really beautiful. And as soon as I got done with that, I was kind of like, it threw me a little bit, and I was like really lost at where to go from there. And for whatever reason, I was feeling really fuzzy in my head. Like I was looking out at the people, but I really couldn't focus on them. And suddenly, within a few seconds, all of a sudden, everybody just very silently and collectively all just get up and they just start walking out. And for a moment, I kind of panic, and I'm kind of like, I'm kind of like fumbling over myself. Like, what do I do? Where are they going? What just happened? Like, why is this going on? And I look over at Jason, and Jason kind of drops his head and he starts walking out with him.
Oh
man.
There's
and
a
so
twist.
I'm like, I'm trying to save face, and I'm just kind of like acting like we're all going to an after party, and I'm like following everybody out, and we're all talking and just like acting like nothing devastating just happened. And that's pretty much all I remember about the dream. Yeah, so it's a very typical dream that I have when I'm about to do something, especially, I mean, I don't think I've had too many of those dreams surrounding the podcast itself, but definitely around performing. Can't tell you how many times I've had dreams of performing live on stage, the music that I write, and totally blanking out on all the words. So I don't know. I haven't had much time to like really piece into what this dream holds for me, but it, I mean, right away, it just kind of, especially the Grinch being there, brings up not, I don't feel too victimized in this dream personally. It does kind of like bring up a lot of like worth issues and I guess kind of victim stuff, but I don't like feel wholly devastated in the dream. But yeah, the fact that the Grinch is there definitely it brings all of my attention to like all of the ways that I try to work through those issues of, you know, feeling like I'll never be worthy of my own love, like people walking out without saying anything. Like, am I going to love myself in this moment, or am I going to feel completely devastated? Like that's how a lot of that works within me. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious about that. So we'll see what the analytics do if everybody just stops listening right at this point.
the episode that we bomb. Yeah.
Oh god, that's so funny.
You know, dreams they want us to work through our feelings by creating scenarios that feel very real as they're happening, and then we can see through our reactions to those scenarios where we're really at. They want to test our habitual responses too, and you know, the response that you might have had in the past to feeling rejection might have been something that you just fell apart. But you had the resilience to stay with it even once the people in the audience start leaving, and you have this question like, what did I do?
Yeah.
And it's something that's very important to you, the the um the response that you get to what you put out there, whether as a musician or as a podcaster, as a father, as a husband, and all the roles that you play in your life and the endeavors that you put yourself into. The response that you get from it is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And now here you are, and something that's very important to you, this podcast, and also being, in a public performance situation. And now you're kind of put to the test. How is Steve going to react? Is he going to find something within him that says, well, I know what my worth is,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't necessarily need anyone else to confirm it for me? Or is the Grinch going to win out and close you off?
Right. Is the
So-
rejection going to steal all of my Christmas joy?
Yes. And you seem to have broken the usual pattern there. Your reaction, you want to kind of follow them out of that place. And that movement at the end of the dream suggests that there is something waiting for you. There's going to be a progress of some kind because you're leaving that scene. So there's something coming up in the sense that you're going to find something new in yourself, like a new response to that kind of situation. And it's going to be because you feel differently overall and specifically about situations like that. It's so your reaction there is very interesting, that you want to leave that. So even though it's a place that's set up as like, hey, this is where, people have come to see us, and this is a chance for us to shine in front of an audience and to be recognized for our work, that you're willing to leave that space. And maybe it's saying that you don't need that recognition anymore. And the reason why would be, can you fill in the blank for me, Steve? Why would be the reason why you wouldn't need that recognition anymore? And why would you be willing to leave that scene, to leave that place where you've been getting the recognition that you've sought?
Yeah, or attempting to get it. Yeah. Yeah, I would have to say, like, the journey of discovering my own worth and knowing my own worth, before what, life can affirm within me, is a big part of why that might be changing. And definitely knowing and feeling in my heart that the mission of this podcast is bigger than me. It's bigger than my own sense of self-aggrandizement, or like any way that I could like use this to bolster my own ego. This is bigger than me. It's more important than me. And yeah, if we're looking at like this, then definitely that's where I would go.
Well, that's my sense of why the Grinch was brought into this dream. Steve bared his heart in the episode that we call If You Want to Come Into Your Power. He told us about these recurring dreams that he had about the Grinch, and how he came to find that there was a part of himself that related to that character. The feeling of being separate from all the people down in Whoville, who, the Grinch lives up on the hill, and he hates Christmas because he sees all the other people having a good time, and he doesn't feel like he's a part of it. So he separates himself and lives within his own wound and nurses that wound in a way. So when you see the Grinch being brought into this dream, my sense is that it's referring to the side of you that could have reacted in that way of kind of withdrawing and wanting to separate from all the people who were in there once things started going in that way that you weren't liking, once they started walking out. But instead, at the end of the dream, you want to walk out with them. And to me, what that's saying is that you want to change the way that you would habitually respond in those circumstances. You want to change that part of you that wants to just withdraw and get all grouchy and say, well, they ain't worth it anyway. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of part of what I was thinking as I'm picturing that scene and kind of feeling my way into it. I mean, I'm up there on the stage with you too, as a character, and, there was a part of me that reacts the same way that, to handle a wounding experience, you say, well, it wasn't that important to begin with. This thing that I was doing fell apart, or it didn't get the recognition that I wanted. So there's a part of me that says, well, I'll show them.
Yeah. And something else that just kind of flashed when you were just speaking about what you were just saying was the fact that, to me, the Grinch story has so much to do with belonging. The perceived rejection of everybody standing up and walking out, even you, like that, that feels like like being outcasted almost. And I think in most cases, I would see that as like a slam against my sense of belonging with people. So I feel like the theme of belonging definitely has a really big part to do here. And now I'm really curious about that, because I really like your idea about that we're going somewhere. And I guess I'm going to have to wait and see where that where is. Because part of me is like, right now, with this whole notion of belonging thrown in the mix here, I'm grappling with, is going with them who just decided to walk out without saying anything, is that me not knowing my own worth? Because part of me feels like I'm going with everybody just so that I don't feel like I just got left behind. And I wish I could remember specifically exactly how that felt in the moment, to know for sure, like, if I did feel like I was just going along just out of a sense of false belonging, or if or if it just felt more of a mature reaction. So I might have to sit with that for a while. I'll be curious to revisit this now. And I think maybe it's coming up in this dream just because of the fact that I feel like I am capturing a sense of true belonging. I mean, doing this will help be a nice segue into like beginning to talk about, what this has all meant for the two of us to do this. So I know for me personally, doing this podcast has been so edifying. Feeling on purpose, this is such a passion project for me that I feel so deeply on purpose doing this, and I've never been engaged in a creative project that I was like a full yes with. Like my music, I have a lot of insecurity about the music. It's something that reaches so deep inside of myself that to bring it out brings up all kinds of all kinds of insecurities about it. This in particular, I mean, it does bring out some insecurities, like putting these all together. I mean, these are very long episodes. I put a lot of heart into how we construct these and how we portray these, that it is also like a pretty vulnerable thing putting this out there. But the mission of this, unlike my music, which is more of my offering to the world, but this feels like it's more of, it's not just me. It's you and I. It's you and I and the guest. It's you and I and all of our guests putting this out there to the world. That it feels more of a sense of belonging in that regard as it is. That it feels bigger than me, regardless. That this podcast feels like, I feel like I can give it a full yes, just for the fact that it is bigger than me, and that I can rest in the belonging that I have with you in this and with everybody else that comes on here, that we're all like kind of in this together, and I don't have to feel so exposed. Like this is a beautiful thing, and the mission for our podcast is so, we have it so perfectly constructed that there's no like weird feelings about being behind it, because it's so true, and it's so true to both of us. Like We want to bust the Western myth that dreams mean nothing. Here is story after story of why that is true. I mean, it's so crystal clear to us, and there's no hesitation there because that's absolutely what I believe. So I'm like such a firm yes on this podcast. It's the most beautiful thing that I feel like I've ever had a hand in creating because I feel so all in on it. And yeah, so I think this is coming up in this dream probably to poke that issue because I feel such a sense of belonging through creating this. And you know, the affirmation that we've gotten from people about how they feel about this podcast has been so edifying for me to know that what we're doing really matters. That to have a dream like this where everybody stands up and walks out, it does bring up a lot of feelings that I don't think I've really felt about this podcast. So I guess the dream knew that it knows that if it portrays me in a musical fashion, that I can poke that wound all day long. I'm going to react to it no matter what. I think it knew that if it gave this dream that I was going to be really puzzled by it, just for the fact that that's not really an experience that I feel too strongly towards this podcast. And so I think it opens up that wound in a whole different manner. So yeah, I'm gonna have to sit with that for a little while longer, I think.
There's one other thing I wanted to note is the shirt is, if you wear a shirt, it goes over your chest, which means it's close to your heart.
Wow.
So you're telling, the podcast and everything that it's meant to us is, and for our guests too, it's been, the labor of love, the thing that comes from your heart. So if you put that shirt on, then you're holding that thing close to your heart. So this is one of those really challenging dreams, because on the surface of it, it might look like the dream is set up a scenario where you're right back into the same sort of wounding experiences, which in the past have sent you for a tailspin. Being sensitive about your creativity and your art and putting it out there, and then getting reactions that are they end up wounding you.
Mm-hmm.
Your music and the way you described that when your father said, well, maybe you should have a backup plan, when you told him that when well, Dad, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to create music and bring it to the world. And he's like, oh yeah, sounds like a good idea, but you better have a backup plan. And you went through this wounding experience that you've re-experienced over and over again. But so even though this dream looks like it's a replay of something that you've experienced that was bad, a wounding experience, I think that there's actually something showing in this dream that you're now past that point you were before, because you didn't react in the way that you might have in the past. You didn't go back into being the Grinch again. And instead, your thought was, I want to move out of this space. And even though that's, there's kind of a sense of, well, am I just doing that because I don't want to be the only one left here? That everyone else is leaving, so I'm going to leave along with them, But that's, I don't see that in the dream. And part of it is because me as a character in your dream, I leave that space too. So what it's implying to me is that you're ready, that place that you've been in for so long.
Whoa,
where you have been touchy, you've been very sensitive about your work and about yourself and your art. You're now ready to leave that behind. And whatever space you're going to is not determined yet. That's why you don't go to a new place in the dream. But it is saying that the old place that you were in, you're not in that space anymore.
Wow. Okay.
And the dream
So
is actually
all of that happened
challenged
right
you.
after she gave me the shirt. So
yeah,
it's interesting because I was almost about to refute the fact that I felt like I was just tagging along. But I feel like the fact that you just brought that up, and I'm realizing that it happened right after she gave me the shirt, that it almost feels like now, if I think about it a little bit more detached, that everybody just stands up and walks out as if they're trying to help me see that this story isn't, we're not the story's done, essentially. Yeah, it's kind of like what you said about, like, we're all, we're leaving this space of...
You're no longer in the Grinch space. Yes. The action happened. You were given the shirt. The shirt was an affirmation that there was someone who was so touched by our work, by your work, that they did something to show it, to show their appreciation for it. So once that action was done, it was saying, now you have this thing that you needed to be able to move on from that space.
And maybe being seen. So I feel like a lot of the people that have come on the show would probably agree with this statement that, speaking your story so fully out there and being seen truthfully in it has a wild way of really healing some of our shame issues. And the Grinch story is so wrapped up in shame. I think I heard that in a large part, shame can only be healed by making yourself so naked that it can't touch you, because the way that shame works on you is that it causes you to want to hide yourself. So the only antidote to shame is radical vulnerability. And so I feel like that gift is a huge statement of that I do have belonging, that people see me in the struggle that I've had, and they still love me. They honor what it is that I have to offer this world. And then everybody was like, "Yeah, we're done here. What needed to be said to you has been said."
That's what I see. In the dream, it creates the perfect scenario for that to happen. And on the one hand, the action that happens after you get the T-shirt looks like a rejection, but it's actually an affirmation. It says, yes, our job is done here. This is what the people came there to see. When the woman gives you the shirt, that's the action. That's the turning point in the story.
Wow.
And now it's actually saying that it's okay to leave. And I think, Steve, that's why you reacted by saying, well, okay, if they're all leaving, I guess I'll leave too. Yeah. That cast of characters within you has said, do you have you learned yet that this isn't rejection? And if you do feel something that's like rejection, have you learned yet that you can leave that space? And I wanted to set up a contrast by creating a hypothetical, or asking a hypothetical. What would the Grinch do in that situation?
That's a great question. I guess which Grinch are we talking about? Are we talking about
it's a hybrid,
pre top of Mount Crumpet or post?
Well, pre, because I'm picturing, the Grinch from the show, the one that we know best. And how did he handle rejection?
He was bitter and angry and hated the Who's. He was ready to try to steal all their joy.
Yeah.
Because he thought thought that would bring him happiness. And then...
and he retreats to his mountaintop.
Yeah.
And nurses his wounds. And so you didn't do that, though. You could have very easily in that situation. the scenario that the dream created. I mean, that could really sting. But you know subconsciously that there's something else that's going on in that scene. You know it as you're dreaming, and what you're actually reacting to is that underlying feeling that you're sensing. You look out and you see everyone leave, and at first it kind of takes you aback, and then you go, okay, well, I can roll with this. If you all are leaving, I'm going to go with you.
Yeah,
And that's where the habitual pattern has changed. That's the turning point in the story, and also the turning point for you. So
yeah,
that's
I just
how
wish
I would,
instead of you just lowering your eyes and walking away, you would have grabbed me around the shoulders.
So, all right, come on, brother. Yeah, man. Yeah, I wish my character could have done that too. You know, earlier tonight I was just writing about dream characters and how important it is to separate them from the people that you know that they look like, when they look like people that you know, important people in your life. They're still actors who are in a story, and they're following at least an outline of a script. They're not the people that you know. So the tendency, though, is to project that idea on them. Well, there's Jason in my dream, and he leaves along with all of them too. Oh my God, you know, like that's my partner in the podcast. Why would he do something like that?
Exactly.
And we got to figure out what it is that I represent to you in the dream space, because the image of me is just, it's imagery wrapped around an idea. There's an idea in the form of the dream character that is Jason in the dream. And we have to figure out what it is that I represent. On the one hand, it makes sense that I would be there if we're doing a live recording of the podcast. Since we're co-hosts, you would expect me to be there in the scene with you. But then the action that happens when I leave with everyone else, my thought is that maybe it's that there's something that you know from our experience together that has enabled you to be able to break that pattern of responding Grinch-like to rejection, and that you're ready to move on to a new space. There could be a deeper level of the dream that also speaks literally. Maybe our podcast is going to go off in a new direction now, going forward. But there also might be something where you and I have, as we've done this podcast, we've shared so much with each other. We know each other like brothers now.
Yeah.
And there's an obvious discrepancy with reality in the way that my character acts in your dream. You know that I wouldn't ever leave you hanging like that.
Yeah.
So that action we know has to be symbolic of something. And so my thought is that there's something that we have learned together by doing this podcast and sharing everything that we've shared and exploring our dreams with each other and coming to these really awesome insights about things that have, you know, been with us for all these years individually that we have struggled with. Now we're ready to, because of that, we're ready to move on from that space. The what we have learned about ourselves by doing this has also enabled us to be able to leave the Grinch behind, which we were just talking about before we started, recording tonight, is that I came to a realization about myself and my own sort of Grinch within me and where that comes from. And then Steve, for the audience, comes in with this, it's almost like he's speaking as me, where there were times when I was like, people who, when they don't respond in the way that I want them to, I sit there and I say, well, or they want something of me. I turn around and say, well, I don't ask much of you. So you should be able to understand and give me what the space that I want. which is very Grinch-like because I would retreat to the top of my mountain, and go crawl into my cave. And I just wanted to be alone. Won't you people just leave me alone? I don't ask anything of you. You don't ask anything of me. Or you need to just understand when I'm going to withdraw from all of this stuff, I'm going to be my own little Grinch. And I came to an understanding about where that comes from in myself. The experience in the crib of looking around and wondering, where are the people who are supposed to take care of me right now? I'm hungry and there's no one here. There's, I've been in this crib and my eyes are open. I'm looking around and, people aren't there. They haven't shown up for me. So there's one last idea in this, that idea of people showing up for you. When they don't show up for you, it creates that attitude, that Grinchiness of, well, I don't ask much of anyone else, so they shouldn't ask much of me. And there's an idea that I think is kind of coming forward here, is that maybe that's what we're leaving behind. And that, here's another thing. You didn't ask for that T-shirt in the dream.
Well, it's so weird that what we had talked about off air before we started recording is now becoming a part of this conversation. That's
in a meaningful sort of way.
Oh my God, dude, it's unreal. I do like that. The idea of showing up, though, that really has a lot to do. Yeah,
they all show up to hear us, and then the lady shows up and she has a gift for you. These are things that you didn't, that part of it at least, from the story that you didn't ask for that. It was just given to you. And I think in the same sort of way that's the sort of thing that melts the icicle in the heart. That's the thing that makes the Grinch open up, is those sort of spontaneous expressions of when people appreciate you.
Yeah, because I mean that felt in the dream like an act of true belonging. It felt like I was so truly and fully seen that she would take the time to make a gift that was so personal to me. Maybe it's making this great contrast between the feeling of having all of these people show up, having the one woman give me a gift. It all felt so it felt like in my heart of hearts, like how I would feel if I felt like I truly belonged. Like, to think that all these people would show up because they cared about what the two of us were doing, and then was given such a personal gift. But then, it creates the contrast of everybody leaving, and it kind of makes me scramble a little bit. So, fuck, man, I'm gonna have to. I think we should come back. I'll have to come back to this. I want to talk about some of the other stuff, but I can't believe how much this opened up. I wasn't I thought we were going to just be like, yeah, this is a little cute dream I had, blah, blah. And, wow.
It's just like us to take it and run with it.
I know. Here I am,
so we can.
Here I am, wondering, what this episode is going to become, and, sure enough, it's staying true to itself,
Yeah.
I first just want to congratulate Steve and Jason on this special anniversary. 2 years of creating and producing and composing music for this amazing podcast series, The Dreams That Shape Us. It's an extraordinary accomplishment, and it reflects the many deep talents and the soulful grace of these two men. I am so honored to have been a part of this journey with my interview, The Very Thought of You. And I've had such poignant feedback from people who've listened to that podcast, which discusses my long journey through Alzheimer's with my mother, and how the dreams we shared during that time illuminated her experience for me, brought healing and comfort, and ultimately completely transformed how I perceived Alzheimer's. And I feel that's been the takeaway for many, that there's a layer to the experience of Alzheimer's and a journey within it that is very different from the outer experience. I have been so moved by the podcasts I've listened to in this series. Each is so unique, some are so deeply personal, all bring rich new insights to aspects of dreaming and just to the journey of life. I am so grateful to Jason and Steve for their vision, for their tender guidance and openness, and their very, very hard work. You are each a gift to the world, and I hope to be here for your 5th anniversary and your 10th. I am so looking forward to all that will unfold in your series in the interim and how it will shape all of us who are fortunate enough to experience it.
I kind of started to tell a little bit about like what it's meant for me, you know, to be doing this. So I'm curious to like, I don't think we've ever had like a point blank conversation where I've actually asked you like, you know, how much does it mean for you to be doing this podcast with me? Yeah, just like what is your own experience of it? Like, how do you feel being a part of this?
For one, there's a lot that's happened that's been very unexpected, and surprisingly so through the feedback that we get from the people who listen. We find them on like Instagram and Facebook, and we hear from people who've been our guests, and we've heard about what being on the show has done for them. And there's this sense of wonder about, you know, of seeing something growing on its own and the things that it's doing for people, and the ways that people are responding that wasn't in the script.
Yeah.
You know, like I didn't know that these things were going to happen. And they've really, you know, at times it's given me a lift that I needed, and a sense that I'm part of something that's really valuable to do. I know that there are people out there who are hearing these shows and getting so much out of them, and it's going on to ears that I never knew were even out there that would be listening. You know, finding out that Robert Moss listens to the show.
Wait, what?
You know, and Robert Moss,
does he really?
You know, that he has listened to it. Okay. I know that he's aware of it because one of our guests said something to that effect, that Robert had heard it and said something to her about it.
Wow.
And
well, big shout out to you, Robert.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't. And for our listeners, Robert has been a guru of the dream for decades now, and his book Conscious Dreaming was the first one that I read early on as I was exploring, you know, dreams and what people had to say about them through their writings. When I read Conscious Dreaming, Robert was the one who opened my mind to there being experiences outside of the conventional, the kind that you would take to an analyst and break it down and you find all the meaning to it and stuff. And Robert had this more experiential way of approaching a dream as this, you know, sort of relationship between you and the universe, and that there could be things that would happen through a dream that were quite unconventional and unexpected. So anyway, I have a lot of respect for the guy. I've read a lot of his books.
Yeah, I was going to say, I got at least 2 of them, I believe.
Yeah. The Secret History of Dreaming, for anyone out there, that is such an awesome book, The Secret History of Dreaming, by Robert Moss. Yeah. But so finding out that there are people that I really respect who are hearing us on this show and really digging our work, that really struck me.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's the like because we did this show together, you end up out, as a guest in my home over the summer so we could go to the conference.
Yeah! This guy's been holding out on me.
It's not to say that wouldn't have happened anyway, but how all that circumstance came together to be able to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
There was some larger forces that were working on that, because the way that everything came together was just so synchronous. And then the experience that we had at the conference together just affirmed it for me that this feels like something that was meant to be on a bigger level than the two of us, the one of us, the two of us. There was something bigger, and I knew the moment that when you asked me, and you said, "Hey man, I got an idea. I'd like to do a podcast, and you're the person I want to do it with." And you do not know that you were and I said this on our website, and I know you read it, but I'll tell it for everyone else in the audience who hasn't heard this. If it was anyone else, I would have said no. Wow. Because I had so much else that was going on in my life at the time. And I had just told myself that I needed to ramp back my commitments. And I know what a commitment a podcast is.
Yeah.
But I'd also thought to myself that if there was a chance to do a podcast, that I would do it if the right circumstance came along, which meant having someone to help lift the load.
Yeah.
Because trying to do all this stuff on your own is a hell of a lot of work. So then you come along and you say that, and I knew when you asked, I knew it was just, I was like, yep, this is it. This is the only way that I would have ever said yes to this, was this exact way that this came together.
Wow.
So I knew that there was something that was larger, that was speaking to me. And now I know, after 2 years looking back on this, at not just the episodes that we've done together, but the impact that this journey has made on our lives.
Yeah.
And that I can look back on that, and it's just a huge affirmation that it was meant to be.
Yeah.
It was the right thing to do. It was meant to be. And I'm really glad that we've done this together.
Yeah, man.
So,
wow, that's
what
I'm sure I did read that on the website, but I had since forgot. And so that like just hit me right in the chest, man. That's so cool. And that like means a lot to me to think that you wouldn't have, if it was anybody else, you would have been like, nah, I don't think so.
The podcast, The Dreams That Shape Us, is a labor of love, co-hosted by two men who share a brotherhood of dreams and of life with each other and with each guest that they invite onto their show. Jason DeBoer and Stephen Erwin are an amazing team. Each of them brings their own unique gifts to craft a show that is both warm and wise. I knew Jason for several years before he met Stephen, and have been the lucky recipient of Jason's generosity of time and skills. I was so delighted that they found each other. The combination of Steve's original music, along with their very different yet complementary styles, has created one of the best podcasts out there. Stephen and Jason have mastered the art of interview leading and following, and each guest is made to feel special. When I listened to the show that I was interviewed for about Dreaming My Daughter Home that Jason hosted, I could hear how he not only asked great questions, but also led us into a far-ranging discussion on life, spirituality, and the universe beyond the original point of the show. Stephen's inserts of commentary and music wove the show together with heart and soul as well as knowledge. Thank you both. Your show is truly a gift of the dream.
You were the right girl. You were the right one to come up at the dance and say, "Do you want to dance?" You know.
Yeah. Well, I suppose when somebody comes to you and be like, "Hey, we're gonna create this podcast together called The Dreams That Shape Us," you're like, "Damn, that's a hell of a name." But yeah, one thing I did want to say was that when I didn't even know if I would do the podcast. I don't think I would have done it if you had said no. So that's like really crazy to think that you wouldn't have done a podcast unless I asked you. And I don't know if I would have done the podcast if you wouldn't have said yes. So it feels like we both needed each other to fit this together. And I still believe that's the case. I mean, when I sat down and I was thinking, I kind of want to do a podcast, but I usually get into this habit of taking on really big creative projects and I'm the only person involved. And it's a huge commitment and I love it for it, but it's like I already have creative commitments. Like I have commitment to my own musical life. Like I'm like, if I dive into this podcasting world, I really don't want to do this alone. I kind of want somebody to be there to, to help propel this and to kind of, kind of do this dance with. And I kind of just sat back and was like, well, who would you do it with? And like, without even a split second, like you were right there. And I'm like, yes, that feels right. That feels exactly who I want to go. And then all of a sudden I'm like going through things in my head and I'm like, and this guy knows about audio. And he could, help with the mixing and the editing and all that shit. And I don't have to worry about doing all of that all myself. And I'm just like, oh my God. Okay. If he says yes, then I'm a hard yes on this too. If he doesn't say yes, then I don't know if I can take on this massive of a project. Cause, oh man. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, baby, I'll dance with you.
And something that a lot of people have said to us is that, like, I really appreciate the fact that it's two men, bringing this to the dreaming community, and where our first, outside of Harper, our first episode, I think our first like 8 or 9 episodes was all women, and I'm sitting there going, God, when are we going to have any of the men, bold enough to come on here and like share their stories? And I'm sitting there going, God, I love that there was no problem with the way that it happened, but, and these women's stories were so beautiful and so necessary for the podcast. But I was like, God, we have to find a way to get the men in. And I feel like if they were secretly listening, I think they eventually just realized that we are a safe place for them to show up. And ever since, like, I think it was Jim's episode where he talked about his journey with his adopted kids, it's very speckled. It's kind of like every other is a man, woman, that kind of thing. Or there's even been like a slew of back to men. So that's like really exciting to me to see that men are coming forward now, and they know that this is a safe space for them to come and share their stories. That means a lot to me because it is kind of lonely in the dreaming community as a man.
It's about 80%. Yeah, it's about 80% female for what I've seen, maybe 75 or something. And we've had people note that we are showing up as 2 men doing this podcast together, and we're kind of holding that the space of that perspective. It's not to say that we see things any that differently because we're men, but there are a lot of women who are females are just naturally attracted to dream work. for whatever reason, maybe because it's more intuitive than it is, strictly rational and logical.
Yeah, I think I think that has everything to do with it. That most men are just like dreams, like goofy shit. Like, what the hell are those little things?
Unless they can dissect it, you get trained in psychoanalytic techniques or something like that, and then it falls into a realm that they're more comfortable with.
Yeah,
because they can bring that sort of rational, side to them and kind of dissect a dream. They can analyze it.
Yeah,
and
well, I think if most men realize the
that,
kind of adventure that dreams lead you on, I think that would be really attractive to them. And I mean, just the intensity of them. I don't understand like why the intensity of them isn't more of a draw for men to like dive into them, because that's what it was for me. I mean, when I had my first spontaneous lucid dream that like shook me to my core, and had a few other dreams outside of that, just the intensity of them and the sheer rawness of like the power that I could sense was in there. That was a total hook for me. So I think the two of us being men, being able to speak to a man's perspective of dreams, or just the way that they've worked in a man's life, and other men can see that and be like, oh damn, like that's actually sounds really kind of cool, and like I wonder like what that experience would be like in me. And to have two men who have been doing the work for a long time to be able to share our perspective on what that looks like, I think holds a lot of power for the potential of if a lot of men are listening to the show, and they're not doing dream work, that I think there is a great potential there for it to attract a lot more men. So that's my hope for it. That's one of my big hopes for the podcast, that the two of us doing this can open the door for more of the masculine energy to find its way into the dream working community. Yeah, man, I think it's really cool. And it's helpful, the fact that, we both have partners. I think it would be a little bit harder if you were a woman for me to tell Erica that I was going to disappear right now it's 11:30 at night and I'm doing this. I think that would be hard to explain.
And there's your baby crying in the background.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear that, but yeah, she is. Yeah.
I hear her. Yeah. Steve is a new father, for those who are not in the know on this.
I don't think I've said that yet, but yeah, right before Thanksgiving, we just welcomed our little baby girl into the world.
So he's trying to find the time. His time is in demand. Yeah. So trying to find to be able to do this is just so you know, we're not sitting around hitting the bong all day with nothing to do. It's but I do feel that showing up for ourselves as men and giving a voice into a community that is female majority, I would say dominated, maybe wrong word, but there's just a lot of females who are attracted into dream work these days. I know from the workshops that I've given, I've done enough of them where I walk into a room full of people who are there to hear me talk, and I can usually say that it's going to be 75% female, and I don't have to even know anything about the venue or anything else. Mm-hmm. I've done it at libraries and community centers and health spas and bookstores. Who shows up? And it's because that's the demographic that seems to be attracted to dreams. My publisher has said the same thing when they look for advertising for my books and stuff like that, media outlets and stuff. What do they look for? Well, they're aiming towards a certain demographic, middle-aged female, So for all the ladies out there who are in that demographic and all those who are not, we want to know that we appreciate you. And that we hope that we're bringing something to this that clicks something into place for you too, in the same way that you're clicking it into place for us.
Yeah, and we hope that
there's
hearing this from men is healing for women also. That
yes,
that it can restore a bit of hope that men aren't completely gone.
Yeah.
The Dreams That Shape Us. What a wonderful podcast. Before my interview with Stephen, I thought I had squeezed every drop of unconscious meaning from my teenage scavenger dream and the dream's parable about life's harvest. I think I chose this dream because I felt very comfortable with the dream material and I didn't think there would be any surprises. Boy, was I wrong. It really was helpful to revisit a 20-year-old dream with Stephen's guidance. I was enlightened even more. With his thought-provoking questions and his gentle manner, I learned to be forgiving of that teenager that lives inside me, to give her unconditional love and patience. And I think I had to dive one more time very deeply into the material to finally let go of the notion that the primary message of the dream was about my daughters and my relationship. No, the primary message was about my own maturing heart and its capacity to love. Thank you for helping me finally understand that, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen Irwine and Jim DeBoard, for your podcast and for my dreams consideration. It was really fun to explore the dream with you guys. My dream was full of dream puns, which were irresistible, and we had so much fun with that. The added music and effects truly brought my dream to life. You guys are very creative, and you did a great job. Congratulations to you both on 2 years of success.
To kind of move into another area I wanted to dive into here tonight was I wanted to look at a few of the episodes, and I'll keep this open-ended, so if you have any ideas on episodes that you can think of that you have stories to tell about it, I wanted to give people a little bit of kind of behind the scenes kind of stories of anything that you could say about certain ones that nobody knows about. And I can start with this if you
go for it.
If you want to sit there and think for a second. I'm putting Jason on the spot with all of this. I kind of sent him a few of my notes a week or two ago, but he's at my mercy.
Yes, I am.
One of the stories I really wanted to tell was about Mary Jo's episode. So she passed away 2 weeks after we released her episode. And we had recorded her episode, I think, in February that year. So this past February. And I was just coming off of being sick. So if you hear in that episode that my voice cracks a couple of times, was because I was like, I probably should have rescheduled with her. But I was like, no, I have this time right now and we've already scheduled things around it. I'll just, do the best I can and I'll just see if we can make it work. And I went into that episode feeling really nervous about it. And I don't know, I couldn't understand why I was that nervous about it. I knew the subject material was a little on the heavier side, and sometimes it makes me a little bit oh boy, how am I going to hold the space for this? So now in hindsight, especially at the time when she told me that she wanted this to be her last statement, that made me realize wow, that day walking into that, you felt the nervousness of unconsciously knowing that this episode, this interview itself was going to be a really big deal. And you had no idea, you had no idea why. And so I'm man, I walked into that feeling this kind of sacred hush about why this was going to be so powerful, because it really, man, it was just yeah, it was going to be a big deal. Man, I just wanted to share this a little bit because I just think it's so beautiful, and it really, I mean, me and her knew each other loosely before that interview. We had talked on several different really small occasions, but we didn't really know each other that well. But we really kind of sank into such a really sweet little friendship after that interview, and I had sent her a song or two that I had written, and she gave me some really beautiful words about it. And when I found out that she was sick, I actually called her on the phone. And she was so taken back by that. She was like, wow, it really means a lot to me that you felt comfortable enough to actually call me. And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. I just feel like really connected to you. And, I just feel like we established something really great that day. And, I kind of wanted to give you some updates on the podcast episode themselves too. And I just felt like giving you a call was the appropriate move there. And she's like, yeah, I really appreciate that. And we talked, and if any of you know Mary Jo Hyan, you know that what I'm about to say would totally have come out of her mouth. It was so beautifully Mary. She was telling me about her illness, and she was telling me that, I had already gone through chemo before. I don't want to do that again. I'm just going to let it take its course. And if it takes me, it takes me. And I was just so blown away. I'm like, I can't, you're handling this with so much grace. And this is what she said, that I think if you know Mary Jo, you would be like, wow, classic. She said, well, Steve, if I have any grace in this, it was hard-fought grace. And if that doesn't sum up Mary Jo, I don't know what else does. Because I hadn't heard from her for a while, and we had been kind of sitting on her episode for some reason. I had a lot of turbulence go on that spring, and so we didn't even put out an episode, I think, in April. And I just sent her a message one Friday and was like, hey, I just wanted to see how everything was going, how you're doing. We're beginning to do some work on your episode, and I'm really hoping to get this done for you real soon. And she goes, oh, that's great news, because, things just took a turn for the worse. And, I think by the end of next week, I might be on hospice. And I was like, oh my God. And so I sent her a message and was like, okay, I'm going to buckle down, and this weekend I'm going to completely finish this. We're going to get this done. I really want you to be able to hear this. And I worked on it all weekend, and Sunday morning she sent me a text message I woke up to, and it said something to the effect of, Steve, I've been thinking about it, and I woke up this morning and was dead sure that I really want this podcast episode to be my final comment on dreams. And I just fell backwards into the bed again and was just holding my heart, oh my God, that, I couldn't even imagine a greater honor than that, And so then she heard it, and she just had so much great stuff to say about it. And we're talking on the phone. She has very little energy to even speak, and she's telling me how she felt about it. And she is so worried about me and about my son, because we talk about my son's dream in there in that episode, and she's more worried about the two of us than herself. And it was just so unreal to see how she was walking to her own death. And I'll never forget one of the sweetest things that she had said to me right before the end. We were on the phone, and she said to me, did you ever think that you would companion someone in their death? And up to that point, I didn't even realize that that's what we had been doing with this episode, that this was an act in just the same way that she did for so many other people, where she, through her hospice work, companioned people in their own death. That just stopped me dead in my tracks, and still don't even know what to say about that. It's just like, it felt like such a weighty, beautiful honor of mine to be able to do this. And the other thing about this story that everybody will be completely aghast at was that when Jason recorded his outro for that episode, he had no idea that she was dying. And somehow you, probably in the same way that I felt going into that interview, you felt moved in the way that you did to say everything you did about her. Because wow, dude, I remember what she had to say about that. She was like speechless on the phone with me. She was just like, and to think that he didn't even know I was dying and he had all of those beautiful things to say about me. She's like, I don't even know what to say about that. To think that she had that kind of impact on you.
Wow, what an episode, huh? This is your co-host, J.M. DeBoard, and I've been sitting here listening to Steve and Mary Jo go back and forth, and it just was like a revelation to me, some of the things that they said about getting to the heart of the dream. Listening to Mary Jo talk about a dream is like listening to a true poet describe an amazing view or a personally significant event and all that it feels like even decades later. This eye on a dream, the eye that truly feels into it, gets little attention in traditional schools of dream analysis. And ironically, I think that they fail to see a dream's truest importance to the dreamer. Listening to Mary Jo, I realized that as a longtime dream worker and creator of the Dreams 1-2-3 process of dream interpretation, I don't emphasize the poetry of a dream enough. I overlook its importance too. A poet listens closely to words and phrases, and students of the poet's eye on a dream hear how someone describes a dream and follows them to associated ideas. Like when Mary Jo takes Steve's sapling in the dream about the impaled man and finds in that image words like tender and young and fresh and vulnerable. And by doing so, she lends him her poet's eye to view his dream anew and find in it layers that he hadn't previously known. Her focus only on Steve's words and phrasing strips everything else away. No talk of what happened in a dream and what it might mean, like in traditional dream analysis. Instead, a fleshing out of the feelings brought out by the experience. As Mary Jo says, or maybe I'm paraphrasing her here, the dream views from the heart instead of from the head. And if you really want to understand a dream, view it from the point of view of the dream itself. Mary Jo and Steve speak of retrieving lost parts of oneself, another priority of highest importance for a dream. We lose parts of ourselves when we don't show up for ourselves, or we don't give our best for those closest to us, and when we do things because we don't know better yet. The dreaming mind wants the lost parts of ourselves to know that all is forgiven and it's safe to come home now. Might be scary at first, but our dream self is always with us. We are never alone. Listening to the two of them helped me to remember a dream where I became lucid and touched everything around me, and everything I touched gave off a feeling of rightness. Like this is how I'm supposed to feel, and every moment of my life that I don't feel like this is an opportunity lost. I said to myself, I want to remember this feeling when I wake up. There's a grief in realizing how much life has passed without that feeling. The great voice of the soul, author Thomas More, says that dreams feel like home. They may even show us what home is like for the soul, which wakes up with us every day in a place that doesn't feel like home, a place where people by and large don't live from the heart. Well, after listening to Mary Jo and Steve, I don't want another moment to go by of not living from my heart.
Man, it was just unbelievable. And I had this dream of her right before she died, and I was able to share it with her right before she went, where I was in a car and I pulled into this little country like farmhouse, and they had like this lawn sale that was going on where they were selling a bunch of little trinkets, and I walk up there and all of a sudden I look over and there she is. And we lock eyes and we smile and we hug each other, and we just talked for a moment, and that was the whole of the dream. And I shared that with her, and I was like, felt like such a beautiful way for me to actually, because we never met in person, as like a sweet little send off. And yeah, I don't know, those 2 weeks were just really so, I just don't even know how to explain them. They were so beautiful to be in such close contact with her. And man, I just cannot even believe like the kind of strength that she took to her death. I just, man, and I miss it.
And your word longing, that's a beautiful word, because that too keeps, that longing is what's keeping something alive in us. Even if it's ineffable and we can't name what it is, but it's there, isn't it? Most of us know there's something there. And how do we find it? And there are other paths, but I would say for myself, even being a lifelong meditator, which is wonderful, for me, that way home has been through dreams. I just want to reflect back and say, I have been with you this morning in what we ache for, and that is a sacred conversation, a sacred and vulnerable conversation. And so again, thank you for providing this for me this morning, for the other dreamers that you speak with, and for those that take the valuable time to listen to these kinds of conversations and then find them for themselves.
And for the listeners, Mary Jo was known as she would talk with people who were in hospice about the dreams that they were having, because she felt like it was a calling of hers to companion them in their final days of life, and to help them to understand what they were experiencing in their dreams. There's often a way that people they're letting go and preparing for what comes next. And they'll have very intense dreams. It's not to say everyone who's in that situation does, but a lot of people do. And Mary Jo felt like it was her calling.
Yeah.
And it affected, it made her someone who could be very present and very real, and to prioritize the personal relationship with others over everything else. Because when you connect with someone who's dying, there's no bullshit.
Yeah.
There's no pretension. There's no ego. It's heart to heart. And after I heard her episode, and without knowing that what was happening with her, I felt like what she said to you in that interview spoke to my heart, because I know what that space is like to be in, of loss and of grief. and what it does to make things real and to prioritize for you. You know, these are the things that are important. I started making sure that people in my life knew that I loved them. People who, you know, they may have known it before, but that I wanted them to really know it. And it didn't mean I had to gush over them, you know. I mean, that's fine if I do. But, you know, showing up for them, Mary Jo really affected me that way. So we thank her for that, what she brought to that episode, and all the people who listened. We know she touched a lot of people, and it did end up becoming her last testament about dreams. Whereas Mary Jo had talked with so many other people about their dreams, she finally had a chance to share her own.
Yeah, and that was one of the
publicly.
things, the main things that she had said to me about it was that, you know, every other show that I've been asked to come and speak on, it's, you know, mainly to speak about my work. They want to know about the work. They want to know about the dreams of everybody else, you know, the dreams of the dying. And she's like, you are the first person who has invited me on a show solely and strictly to talk about my personal dreams. And she's like, I just feel like that is such a beautiful, you know, period at the end of the sentence for me. And man, I mean, that's not anything that I thought, you know, going into asking her. That's just how we run this podcast. Like, we don't want to hear about other people's dreams. We want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. We want to be able to ask you questions and you be able to completely fill in all of the blanks, you know? There's so many other dreaming podcasts that I listen to where people talk about their clients' dreams, and it's great and it's fine. And, you know, there's a lot to learn there, but at the same time, like, they can only go so deep with, you know, how it affected that client. They can say, oh yeah, well, it made them realize this and this, but, you know, they can't see into the very fabric of their being and to know, like, all the nuanced ways in which this went to work on their life. So that's why, like, our podcast is done in the same way, where it's like, no, everybody that comes on, no matter if they're a dream worker, and some of them aren't dream workers, which is really cool about our podcast. They're just regular old people who have had dreams that really meant a lot. That they share their own. It's like a prerogative that you must come on here and you must share your own dreams. And it's funny that I've felt there's been a lot of hesitation I've experienced on some of the people in the dream working community of coming on here, because they know that they're going to have to bear their own stuff and they can't hide behind their clients' dreams as examples. Which, you know, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. If you're at any other show that's not long form like ours, you know, you only have like so much time to like really speak to things, so that all works just fine. But yeah, that's a different animal when I send you that email.
I totally enjoyed being on the podcast because it was so great to relive the dream experience and to share it with everyone, and to remember how life-changing the dream was all those years ago, and to discuss it in depth, and then to be asked good questions that helped to bring new understanding and to get another person's perspective and curiosity. It was just wonderful. A lovingly brilliant Aquarian perspective, I might add, in the form of Stephen. And just fabulous to be on a podcast with hosts who understand the beautiful power and healing and messages of dreams and the importance of sharing it with others. I'm so happy for the success of the show. Keep up the good work.
Are you thinking of any other stories that you have about some of the episodes that you've ran?
Well, I do have one. I bet no one knows that the Origins episode, that the audio on my end didn't get recorded very well.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, a 2-hour conversation. You got to set up to record all this. By the time you're done, sometimes with the recording session, it's 3 hours. It can be that long. So Origins was our episode, the origins of Steve and I as dream workers. And so I get done with it and, oh God, finally, we knocked that thing out. And I go back and listen to it, and the audio on my end is so mangled that it's unusable. So, and a lot of it was very spontaneous too, the back and forth between Steve and I. And I'm like, how do we recapture that magic? I don't know if we can, So I went back and I listened to it. And what I did was I played back the recording of Steve asking, making a comment or asking a question or whatever. And then I would approximately know how much time I had. And then I just re-recorded and pretended like it was all live. So there was the part with him that was recorded, and he's, and then I would respond and, like as if it was just a free-flowing conversation, trying to remember what it was that I said when we did the original recording.
Mm-hmm.
And we managed to save that one and paste it all together. I even caught some of the nuances and did some ums and put little things in there to make it sound a little more fluid and natural, as opposed to be sort of reading off of a script. A lot of people wouldn't know that episode was brought to you by Jason cutting and pasting a whole lot of stuff together to make that happen.
Oh man, I forgot all about that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that was a quite an audio editing job that we did on that one to make it happen. I did have the time with Catherine's episode that I went back and listened to it and realized that, I have a $500 professional microphone and I have all the audio equipment because I was an audiobook editor for a while, and narrator. So I had all the professional equipment, and I'm very, Steve knows, I'm very picky about my audio and the way things come together. So I go back after I did the recording with Catherine, and I realized that the computer had defaulted to the laptop microphone, the cheap little thing that I wasn't speaking towards, but was just in the same room because I had all my audio equipment plugged into my computer. And I didn't see that Windows had automatically defaulted the recording over to that, to that microphone instead of the large diaphragm, condenser mic that I had set up in front of me. And I wanted to cry, but Catherine did there was no way of re-recording that, and Catherine had done such a, bang up job of talking about her experience.
I know, to think about wanting her to have to revisit all of that again is like, man.
There was no way. I mean, it was dreams about her child sexual, she was sexual trauma. It came to her as dreams first, and then, recurring dreams that went for years before she realized that what she was seeing in the dream was something that had actually happened. It was symbolically represented, but, it had actually happened to her. So, there was no way of asking her to go back and re-record that.
So when I made this podcast last year, it felt courageous, and it also felt like being in service. It was scary to share such personal and painful pieces of myself and my history. And I'll have to admit, listening to it the first time, I cried. And
after the podcast was out, I realized that it was really healing for me, but I also realized that it had touched some people. I did hear from other women who had, if not similar experiences, certainly equally painful experiences. And I realized that by sharing my story, they had the courage to reach out to me. In some ways, they may have felt seen or recognized, and that certainly made it worthwhile. Additionally, I spoke openly during the podcast about my healing experience using psychedelic medicine, and that was a big turning point for me because the combination of dream work and psychedelic medicine has pretty much been my focus ever since.
We have Harper, our first guest on the Dreams That Shape Us podcast, season 1, episode 1. And we wanted to check in with him. It has been a few years since he had the dreams that gave him the idea that he could have his life back. See, Harper had been told that he had a health condition and he should really take it easy physically because he ran the risk of getting ill. And so he kind of turned into a couch potato. He was very cautious, and like anyone would be in that situation where your health is at risk. And then he started having dreams that basically the message that he got was that he could have his life back. He could be active again. And now it's a few years later, or maybe 2 years later, 3 years later, and we have Harper on the phone with us. And he's going to update us on where he's at in his life. So Harper, welcome back, first of all. And tell us where you are at in your life right now. You are in flight school, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad to be back on here to get to talk to you again. The last time we spoke, I was definitely not doing good physically when it came to my physical health. And really the message of the dreams, as you said, was to essentially hang in there and to keep trying and to not give up hope, not let that little flicker of hope die out. And miraculously, my health did a complete 180. I recovered rapidly. We found essentially something that was causing a lot of my issues. And I underwent a very incredible recovery, and my health turned around. I was able to get involved with a lot more physical things, and now I'm in flight school to become a pilot. And it is the greatest thing that could have happened to me. I'm very happy that I was able to listen to my own dreams and to essentially let them guide me in my life. I trusted that the universe was trying to tell me, hey, this isn't the end. There's still more. Don't give up hope. And sure enough, it was right. So at this point in my life, yes, I am in flight school and I'm feeling a lot better physically. And there's a lot more that I'm able to do that I was not able to do the last time we spoke.
So this is really amazing, the way that your dreams have given you your life back. And we'll give you credit too for listening and continuing to listen. There are people who have these nudges and they don't pay attention to them. They don't listen, and then they don't get the message and they don't get the benefit from it. So we're very happy to hear that you've got your life back. We really started with a bang, brother.
Yeah, man.
Having Harper as our first guest.
Well, since we're on this topic of Harper, unknown to you, but I was gonna paste at the very beginning of this episode a very secret audio that I recorded the first time we talked after I sent you the final product of the first episode. I never told you, but I put you on speakerphone. I recorded you on my little handheld recorder. And
no, you didn't tell me that.
I did not. But you'll have to wait when I publish it to hear it.
Oh
man!
So
your reaction is
my,
so good. Oh man!
That's my anniversary gift.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
The gift.
Yeah, there it is, man. Yeah. Wow.
So what I feel really moved to share about my experience on the podcast was halfway through telling my story. I got to this kind of very scary place where I had to sort of describe this moment when the dreams, I was working with my dreams in my dissertation, and I was deep diving into the dream, into an almost embarrassing microscopic level. And I was really afraid to talk about this because I didn't think I could translate it, but also it would sound kind of made up, or that I wouldn't be able to do it justice. I wouldn't be able to remember it. Therefore, it wouldn't be meaningful or real. And so I thought we were just gonna maybe, just glide right by it. And there's this incredible moment where Jason said,
"Will you walk us through the dream?"
And I kind of was like, oh shit. And I was like, all right. And they just started to go into the dream. And this amazing thing happened where I was able to describe what happened. And where whatever I would do, whatever instinct I had to follow the dream, whatever impulse, the dream would respond. And it was like I would go down a new corridor, a new hallway, or a new image, or something new would happen every time I kind of dissected it. And there was this sudden sort of remembering and revelation that that was the whole point of all of this for me, was that it's not that I had to remember this correctly or tell it right. It was just the simple fact that the dreams were thinking with me, that they were following me, they were one step ahead of me, they were collaborating with me. And this is what blew my mind at the time, and in some way was ashamed of, because I didn't know if anyone would believe me. So this was then what I was coming up against, and had to remember now, not from an embodied place and a trusting place and a heart place, that this was the medicine for me all along, that the dreams were these collaborators, these co-thinkers, these co-pilots, that were present in the interaction with the dream, if you could feel it and trust it. And that's exactly what Jason did for me, was he felt something and trusted something, and that courageous sort of humble question, for me, was everything. That too is that courageous inquiry. If you have that with the dreams, it meets you right there. Kind of funny, I kind of feel it right now the same way I did in talking with Jason. the sort of nervous, vulnerable giddiness. And that's another thing I was just so moving to me, was sharing that giddy, nervous, vulnerable energy with someone else. And it was so special to me. Okay. Hopefully, man, there's not any puffing and the nature's not puffing, and hopefully you can hear this tree creaking. I just feel like it wants to be part of the conversation. There are these firs. I love it. It's so perfect.
Real quick, a story that you did that I think would be amazing for everybody to hear about is the episode with Jim. It's called These Will Be Your Children, I think.
These Will Be Your Kids.
Yeah. There's a story about how he had a prophetic dream 3 years before he adopted the kids that he saw in the dream. That episode was not an interview that you recorded after we had started the podcast. That was actually one that you recorded before we ever even sat down to even talk about doing this. And you said, I think we got to tweak a couple things, but the format's pretty close to how we've been running these. And Jason sends me this interview, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, dude, oh my God. Like he was already doing this before I even came around. Like he was already ready for this. Like there was nobody else that could have been my partner in this than him, because he was already doing it. Like, I just couldn't even believe it. So if you go back and you listen to the episode, you'll hear it. It doesn't even skip a beat. It's just the same exact format, it's unreal.
And it looks like it looks like something else had a different idea in mind for you, but it was still your choice. Would you agree with that? You had to decide that this is what you wanted.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yep.
This is fantastic, Jim.
I knew there'd be sacrifice. I knew there'd be sacrifice. I was willing to do sacrifice, but I didn't understand what sacrifice meant. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I'll sacrifice, but I had no idea how deep it goes, I guess, or the ramifications, or how much of a different person I needed to be to get to where I needed to be the right, to benefit my family the most. Like, just a different paradigm, basically. I was not in the right paradigm, and I had to be forced into it, kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That's right. I was recording. I would meet people on Reddit who had these incredible stories to tell about their dreams, and once in a while, I would actually get them to agree to do something for my YouTube channel, which is it's gathering cobwebs now. Jim was someone that was on Reddit who. He told me about this prophetic dream that he had that was before he ended up adopting these kids. And when he actually met those kids in person, he realized that he, years before, that he had dreamed about them. And it was years later when we interviewed him, and he had been through all these, heavy ups and downs, a lot of challenges adopting kids who'd come out of real challenging circumstances. But he felt like because the dream showed him that these would be his kids, that who was he to say no? Not that that's what he was, the kind of person that he was, but it was definitely a weird a circumstance when those kids became available for adoption, that there was no hesitancy. That he knew, because the dreams had foretold this coming into his life, that he should go forward with it.
Yeah, it felt like destiny.
And I have emailed a little bit with him over the time, after that interview and everything. And, it was a very positive experience for him. And he, and everything is still, going well with his family.
Nice.
So, was very happy to see that, or to hear that from him. And I will say, Love at First Flight, Cougar and Mariah, I never heard from them again, despite, letting them know that the episode was out and then following up with an email when I didn't hear anything back from them, and then following up with another email. Never heard back. Tried both of their email addresses in case something had happened to one, who knows where Cougar and Mariah were at. And I have a feeling that episode might have brought up something in their relationship. I mean, I'm kind of filling in the blanks, but it kind of challenged their origin story, in a way, because Cougar and Mariah, they think that they thought that they might have met in a dream when Cougar, he came onto Reddit looking for someone who had been in his dream. He had seen this girl in his dream, and he thought that maybe she was a real person who was out there. He ends up talking with Mariah on the Reddit board, and they kind of had this origin story that they developed where they thought that they had shared a dream before they had actually met, like on Reddit. And then when we got into the story, I think we kind of realized that it was really more of a shared interest in the subject of lucid dreaming that really kind of brought them together. And we never doubted that it was maybe not them, we never doubted that whether it was them or not became kind of immaterial. Whether they'd actually shared a dream, that part became immaterial. But I don't know what happened, but before that episode, as we were recording it, they were talking about buying a house, and then for them to just drop off the face of it just was not like them. We've had guests who were, we never really heard from them again after they were on the show, not for any reason other than they're just, busy people, and, we never really followed up with them. But with these two, they were very eager to communicate all the way up, leading up to, and then, kind of immediately following the recording, hearing from them saying, wow, that was an amazing experience. Thank you so much, And then we go through, a production and everything. It's a couple months later, we let them know that the episode is out, and then we never hear from them again. So,
when
it
you
really
first
makes
sent
me
me
wonder,
that, their stories did sound like he was more sure of it, or like he really wanted it to be the case. And you could tell by a few things that she says, like at other points in the conversation, it sounds like she actually does believe the fact that maybe it was her. But you can tell in a few like really nuanced points that like it seems like maybe she doesn't quite like truly believe that maybe that was her,
that you didn't want someone who's just pulling your leg. You wanted them to be able to fill in the blanks, the details that you held back. And Mariah, is that right? That you were able to tell Cougar what happened in the dream that he didn't share publicly?
Sort of.
Not that she doesn't, not that she like didn't love him. That seemed pretty obvious by a few things that she said, that she felt like it was fate that they came together. She felt like it was a universe that brought them together. That was all good and true, but it seemed like some of the things that Cougar was really reaching for may not have necessarily been what she truly believed. But it's still like a really interesting story. I was actually listening to it today, and I just have to say this just because we got on this topic. There's a point where you refer to her as a hummingbird, and you start talking about your hummingbird feeder, and it made me laugh even harder this time around hearing it, just because I've been to your house and I know your hummingbird feeder.
Yes.
But there's a line right at the end of you talking about this whole thing where you say, man, I just wonder what it would be like to be a hummingbird. And I don't know why, but it just made me just fall out laughing today. It just Just imagining you sitting in your house wondering what it felt like to be a hummingbird.
Yes. I love hummingbirds. I watch them. Yes. I sometimes look out at them zipping around my backyard, man, and I love hummingbirds. And they're like little missiles, man. They can go so fast and so fast and so fast, so fast and so fast. And I love hummingbirds. Yes. Man, wouldn't that be awesome to be a hummingbird? I sometimes look out at them zipping around my backyard, man, and I kind of sometimes wish that I was a hummingbird, or I could at least be one for a moment, which sounds like a great thing to incubate in a dream. So, yeah, and Mariah was very much a kindred spirit in that way. She was the hummingbird who was zipping around in her dreams, lucid dreaming about flying and zipping around from place to place and able to, yeah, she was the hummingbird. And yeah, then you come to my house and you see that I've turned it into a hummingbird haven. So, that's they're everywhere. Yeah, man. There have been a lot of ways that we've impacted people's lives through this podcast, the guests and the listeners. We really hope that Mariah and Cougar, whatever's happened with them, that maybe sometimes there are innocent explanations for things.
Yeah, because if I'm remembering correctly, I think that was it probably was an episode where we both kind of were like, all right, well, I think going forward we need to think about just to make sure that we're presenting the material properly and we're not misrepresenting things or that I'm losing my words right now because my baby's screaming upstairs, but
yeah. And just to fill in the listeners, we'll get an idea of what an episode is going to be about. And because we've talked about it with the guests, oftentimes we get their dreams from them. They'll write them out for us. And, and then we do a little pre-interview so that we can walk into the interview knowing what we're doing. Well, in this one, it was that Mariah and Cougar had shared a dream, and this was their origin story as a couple. That and then he goes on the Reddit board, and starts looking for the person who was in his dream, and then there's Mariah, and it sure sounds like she was the person who was in his dream. But then we started realizing that we were kind of trying to make the facts fit the narrative, and that wasn't what emerged in the interview. And Steve handled that really well in his commentary, where he approaches that subject. It's a beautiful story, whether or not the facts actually fit, the way that what actually transpired. For people to say that they've met in a dream and then they meet each other in a public space like Reddit Dreams, it's such a fairy tale story that you want it to be true. But as we got into it, or factual, should I say, we want it to be accurate and factual. True gets into ideas like right or wrong and true or a lie. That wasn't what we meant by that, but just that it was factual. And then we found out, well, maybe not. And it became kind of a weird moment there where it was like, well, now what do we do with this? Because we don't want to be presenting something that turns out not to be factual. And I thought that we did a good job of handling that with your commentary.
Yeah, man. I think maybe you've gotten this response already, but I know personally I'm just waiting for that message or that email to roll through where the person's like, I was really cynical going into your podcast about the validity of dreams or the value of dreams, and I'm a true believer now. I'm like really waiting for that kind of response to happen. That'll be really cool. And yeah, a lot of people have been reaching out to me on Instagram and stuff lately, and that really means a lot. All of you have been doing that. I guess I could give a few shout outs to a few people that have been really, really supportive and have had a lot of really cool things to say over the course of this. There's Christy from Sounds Like a Dream. Really appreciate everything that you've had to say about all the episodes and the fact that you've been listening all this time. Beth Foster, really appreciate all the support you've been giving us lately. I just got this really amazing message from a lady named Luna. And yeah, there's I hate to just start listening to people because I'm going to forget so many people. But yeah, everybody that's been reaching out, thank you. Seriously, from the bottom of our hearts, because, like I've said in a few episodes, like this really is kind of like a one-way street unless the people that are listening come and find this. Now, we have no idea, really, how these episodes are truly affecting people unless we hear back from them. So, and I mean, the analytics speak a lot. They speak pretty loudly, too. I mean, like I said, and I mean, within the last 4 months, we've had such a huge spike in listenership and just volume of listening. Like, usually we'll have like a spike once a month when the episode comes out, but the last few months, it's been like this steady growth upwards in this really beautiful way that I can't even believe what is happening. But it just seems like we're exponentially growing on top of ourselves right now, and it's so beautiful to see. And I know it's not our doing solely. I've been a lot better about promoting it on Instagram and stuff like that, but even doing that, I can't imagine that that's what's happening. I know that a lot of people are out there sharing this to their people. They're sharing this on social media. They're texting it to their friends or family. However this is getting out there, I have no idea. But I'm here for it, and I'm so excited to see that because, and not even for my own ego's sake, it's just to think that the mission is happening. The great goal of this podcast is steadily and exponentially happening. That, I mean, we don't do any kind of advertising. All of this is word of mouth, very organic kind of stuff. So anything that any of you have done to help promote this podcast or support this podcast in any way, I just can't even tell you how much that means to both of us. We need that. I mean, outside of our own sphere, we can only reach so many people. And so we really need you to reach the people in your spheres. And then those people reach the people in their spheres. And this is how this grows and ripples outwards. And this is the way that this podcast lives up to its true purpose of reaching people and showing beyond a reasonable doubt that dreams hold immense value for you if you honor them. This is why this is such a big yes. I mean, you can hear it in my voice. Like, I am so yes to this. Like, I am so indebted to the way the dreams have shaped my life that if I could scream this on a mountaintop and everyone in the world could hear me, I would try my hardest to give back to the world what dreams have done for me. I mean, this is why it's such a big passion point for me. Can't even tell you like how incredible it is to have this platform to showcase dreams in the way that we've been doing. Not only I went to school for music recording. I'm a musician. I'm a dreamer. I mean, this project encapsulates all three of those: doing the audio recording, composing music for this, and sharing my passion for dreams and sharing the beautiful dreams that other people have had that have changed their lives. I mean, this is so much on purpose for me. I can't even tell you like how much it means to me to be doing this. So thank you, Jason, for saying yes, because I can't even imagine what the last 2 years would have looked like had I not had this. And I had this really beautiful dream right inside of us starting this podcast. I think I'll share real quick. Where I actually met Alex Bloomberg, who is the CEO of the podcasting kind of conglomerate. I don't know if conglomerate's the right word, but Gimlet. If any of you know of Gimlet, as far as podcasts out there, they have a lot of really amazing shows that they do. It was a couple of their shows that made me actually consider wanting to do it myself, because I'm like, God, these people are covering such cool stories. I have just a deep yearning to want to do this myself. And so it was interesting that as we got the ball rolling on ours, I meet him in a dream, and we're just walking through this little like suburban like neighborhood, and there was a mailbox that was laying on the ground, and he kind of looks at me and he looks back at the mailbox and he does these like gun motions with his hands, like pow pow. And it completely erects the mailbox again, and it looks beautiful and new. And I'm like, whoa, what the hell just happened there? Like, how the hell did you do that? And I think I was just reviewing this last night, and I'm pretty sure I said to him, whoa, are you like Mr. Fix-It or something? And like thinking of like Fix-It Felix from the Wreck-It Ralph movies that my son loved, where he can pretty much, he hits something with his hammer and it makes it new again. And I just feel like that has been a lot of the story for the last 2 years of what this podcast has meant for me, and how it's affirmed me and how it's edified me, and feeling like I'm on purpose. Like doing this podcast and how much I've grown through doing it. Can't even tell you, man. That's like, it's crazy to think about how much this podcast has helped me grow into believing in what I have to offer this world. And it's even like worked in this way of helping me to believe in myself with my actual music. It really feels like it's been this hugely edifying force in my life that I'm so deeply grateful for. And I'm so glad that all the time that we put into this like really makes a difference in people's lives, that it really touches them in all the ways that I would have always wanted. Like our medium of like really cutting to the heart of things, and like how emotional some of these stories are that really move you to tears. They really do. They're so deeply human, and they give so much to everybody who listens to them. They really do. And I just can't even imagine a deeper, more beautiful offering that we could give the dreaming world, and the waking world as well. So that's I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Well, and a mailbox is something where things can be delivered to it. You know, some of it is expected, you know, a letter's coming in the mail, some of it not, but it allowed for you to receive. So through this
it's a giving
podcast,
and a receiving.
You've been able, it opened you up. It kind of created an address for you to be able to receive all the things that this podcast has been able to deliver for you. And oddly, I feel a connection between that dream and the one that you described at the outset about, you know, doing the live podcast recording and all the people are there, because there you were kind of receiving those people into that place there to see you, you know, to see us, but like they're there for the podcast. And in a way, you're also you received the shirt from the, so there's those ideas. It seems like it kind of makes it come.
I like that a lot, because there's the give and take. So it's like you can put a letter in there to send out anywhere in the world, and
which is our podcast goes out everywhere,
and anywhere in the world
we
can
also
send
receive
you a
things
message.
back.
So there's this really beautiful. It's such like a cool little like transfer station of connection, and I feel like this podcast has really given that to me, of really being able to find a platform or like a medium to be able to really interface with the world in a way that's like bigger than me. And even in that first dream that I did share, I start off talking about like giving thanks to everybody who showed up, and really in my mind, like inviting everybody into that space was not necessarily to, put myself up on a pedestal. It was really to invite them in to share this with them, that like, you guys are here with us. Like, this is like a big family. Like, this isn't about us. This is about all of us coming together and being engaged in the storytelling of dreams. And that I invited you here, not to show off myself, but to have you there for it, and that we can share in this together. And yeah, so there was that much for me in that dream, and also the receiving from the audience was, it does feel like such. It really, that whole theme of the give and take is very felt for me. It's something that I definitely is front and center for me with this. That even it's kind of like what you said when I brought Leah in on your story of the past lives episode. I didn't tell Jason what I was doing with that. This is another great story. So he didn't know that I had asked Leah to voice act in that episode, and I totally surprised him with it. And afterwards, he was like, "Man, there was just something about the fact that she did that just made it feel like a family affair. Like, it just made it feel like, these aren't just one-off guests who don't care about us. Like, these are now like, they're kind of like family members. Like."
There was so much to unpack in my interview and dream working session with Steve. It still continues to take new shapes, like turning a prism in the light. You catch a different hue depending on how you look at it, and that is what these dreams of the warrior woman archetype have been for me. And it has stuck with me all this time and really framed how I have seen not only my dreams, but the different challenges and callings that have come my way since. Since that episode, I have been called to forge my own path in a way that has required me to harness my own inner strength and confidence in a way I could have never, ever imagined. And it began with another dream. In the dream, I was giving birth, and I was surrounded by characters who represented 4 of the 5 archetypes of the sacred feminine, and they were all abandoning me. The mother was there, the lover was there, the medial woman was there, and for the first time in all of my dreams, I was the warrior woman. It was incredibly visceral, incredibly scary, and I was begging for help as I was giving birth, and each of the archetypes abandoned me and didn't care. Finally, I was alone in a hospital. Even the hospital staff wasn't coming to check on me, and all of a sudden, a woman appeared next to me. She looked at me and she said, "Why did you call me?" And in between contractions, I said, "Because you were the only one who would come." And then she said, "My name is Tanya." And I woke up because the contraction feeling was so real. When I awoke, I looked up the name Tanya. It means Fairy Queen, the 5th archetype. That was the beginning of a journey that I could have never, ever prepared for. My novel was rejected by over 100 agents, and I ended up setting on a journey to turn it into a fiction podcast, forging my own path to narrate, produce, and promote this storytelling experience in a way like I have never done for any creative project. I also felt the call to become a death doula for my community, which is a sort of blend of the warrior woman archetype and the medial woman, the sacred guardian of the thresholds. And I could not have imagined at the time of my interview on this podcast how so many of those dreams from so long ago were beginning a psychic process that would take years, just as Steve described in my interview. And it's been truly wild to look back and look at the present and wonder about their guidance and wisdom for the future in light of these dreams. I have always valued dreams, but now I see them as a priceless treasure, an ephemeral compass. Thanks to my communication with Steve and Jason on this podcast. Thank you for the work that you do.
Everybody that comes on here and has this deep heart-to-heart with us, like with Mary Jo, like, I don't know if it's the same with you, but almost everybody that I interview, we forge like a really deep friendship and connection through sharing these
Laurel
stories with each
Clark.
other.
I followed up with Laurel quite a bit, and she and I can just kind of look at each other and like, yep, we're on that wavelength.
Oh, and if I can just share this story real quick, it was the most, I got chills when I did it, but when we were at the conference in Tucson, I got to introduce those two. And man, I mean, the way that you handled her story and just the way that the two of you just told that so fully. Oh my God, man, that episode is so beautiful to me, and the story itself is so incredibly powerful. And all of the ways that you guys looked at that story, and just there's so much there that people can utilize. Just unreal the way that whole story came together. And
so episode 8, by the way, Love, Loss, and Everlasting Life with Laurel Clark. Yeah. That was
So I run into her at the conference. We were just all kind of standing around in the lobby, and it was the first time that I had physically met her. We had been talking for quite a few years, and so I knew her pretty well, and she knew me pretty well. But she hadn't met Jason yet physically, and so I see him over there, and I'm talking with her, and I'm like, I kind of like whisper up to her, I'm like, Laurel, I know this would mean a whole lot to him. Can I bring you over there real quick and introduce you to Jason? And she's like, oh yeah, I'm getting really tired. It was like way at the end of the night, but she's like, yeah, I'm really tired, but I would be more than happy to do that real quick. And oh my God, dude, I just stood back, and these two there was like a hush between them for like the first, like, at least what felt like the first 5 seconds. And oh my God, you could just tell there was like such recognition between the two of them, and just what it meant for both of you to have had that conversation with each other and then to have met each other. Oh man, it like made me tear up, and it just sent chills all through my body, and I'm kind of like dialing into that again right now.
This is Laurel Clark, and I feel very honored to be a guest on this podcast, The Dreams That Shape Us. At the time that I was a guest on the show, I had not met either Jason nor Steve in person, but we connected virtually across many miles through the International Association for the Study of Dreams. I've been recording my dreams since 1976 and teaching and working with dreams since 1979. And I have been a guest on radio shows and TV shows all over the world talking about dreams and intuition. And I must say that after 40 years of being a guest on all of these radio shows and podcasts, being a guest on this podcast, The Dreams that shape us is one of the most enriching and soulful experiences that I've had. I really appreciate the deep, respectful curiosity that Jason had. I could feel his attention as he was interviewing me, and the way that he is able to cause his own mind to be still and receptive welcomed me and invited me to tell very personal stories about dreams that had a deep significance and impact in my life. And I found that the way that he asked the questions drew out of me insights that I had kind of danced around before, but had not really gotten to the heart of. So I must say that being a guest on this show was a very heart-centered, soulful experience. And then when I heard the music that Steve composed after he listened to the interview, it was so sensitive and so resonant with my experiences. It was as if the dreams themselves helped to give rise to this music, that he was a channel for my own dreams. So I want to thank both of you, both you, Steve, and you, Jason, for this wonderful podcast, for your vision to bring the importance of dreams to the world, and for your own ability to be intuitive and insightful. So thank you.
Yeah, we have made some really lasting relationships through this, and I think our listeners are getting the idea that they are part of this along with us, not just with our guests, but the listeners too, who we know that you're waiting for us to put out another episode, and it makes it especially important for us to keep our commitments. To have the episodes out on time, and the whole production process that it takes. I mean, every episode from beginning to end is I can't even count on both hands how much work it is if you add it up as hours.
I would say most episodes I at least put in like 12 hours worth of work.
Yeah, and so everybody knows Steve, all that work he's doing to add the music to it and mixing all that in, and it's all being custom created. He's not just grabbing, we could pump this stuff out really fast if we weren't putting so much effort into the productions. And
yeah, can I actually speak to the music real quick?
The custom music. Yeah, man.
Yeah, so when I went to college, I had to take music theory classes, and I actually learned how to write music for the first time. And I had been writing hip hop music up to that, where I was just stealing beats off of the internet. But at that point, I was like actually learning how to write music, and even though that became a clear link for me to create hip hop music from scratch, it also like opened up this really deep yearning within me to actually write instrumental music. But I never really had an outlet to do that. I would make these little silly like videos that I would try to write music to, but I never like to sit there and have to create a whole video just to write a piece of music was like, no, this is dumb. So this has been such a beautiful gift to have this, and to have it be how do you say this? I don't want to keep using the word platform. To have this kind of the way that we're doing this, it really like brings out the drama, and it offers itself to writing really beautiful, kind of cinematic, kind of dramatic music. Not all the times it has to be that heavy, but it seems like a lot of our stories, just because it it is the dreams that shape us. You know, a lot of people bring to us the stories that shape them, you know, and to be shaped by something in your life, you know, there's always some kind of challenge or some kind of hardship or some kind of something that you have to overcome for you to be shaped, to be transformed through it. And so it does offer itself like a movie to be scored in that way of having music that really kind of brings you into it a little deeper. And it's so wild for me to be listening to the raw blank interview and to have a little bit of conversation be told. And, you know, it's just fine in itself. We could just have this podcast just be without music and it would be just fine. But it's so wild to me every time that I write a piece of music for a specific point in the interview, like how it really does draw you in a little deeper.
I was, I think, in a period of, you know, like ethical sort of erosion on the inside, and struggling very hard with that and unable to voice it to anybody or, you know, even to myself. At the same time, I was in a relationship that was going different directions as well. Part of the reason for all this at this time, I'm going to circle back just a little bit earlier, and this is just an important part that will come to play later in the dream. But when I was 17, my father committed suicide, and that grief had been buried for 10, 15 years. And, you know, not about a year before, I'd sort of opened up to that and started reckoning with that. I was, I think, in a period of, you know, like ethical sort of erosion on the inside, and struggling very hard with that and unable to voice it to anybody or, you know, even to myself. At the same time, I was in a relationship that was going different directions as well. Part of the reason for all this at this time, I'm going to circle back just a little bit earlier, and this is just an important part that will come to play later in the dream. But when I was 17, my father committed suicide, and that grief had been buried for 10, 15 years. And, you know, not about a year before, I'd sort of opened up to that and started reckoning with that.
I guess, to what degree does this soften the blow
I think
something so hard?
It's a good question because it's a complicated answer. And
yeah.
I would say it is a heartbreaking journey. I mean, my heart broke over and over again. And I was very aware of my mother's human self aching for us. You can't have that kind of a connection without, I would look into her eyes because we sat in silence so often, and everything was in her eyes, and there was suffering there, and there was, you know, the longing to be with us, with her family. And here she was again. Her worst fear her whole life since she was 7 was being separated from her family. She never wanted that to happen again. She never left her hometown. She didn't like to travel. She always wanted her daughters to come back to the hometown to live. And then here, her worst fear played out. She was with us, but apart.
Wow.
And that was a heartbreaking thing for me.
I guess, to what degree does this soften the blow
I think
something so hard?
It's a good question because it's a complicated answer. And
yeah.
I would say it is a heartbreaking journey. I mean, my heart broke over and over again. And I was very aware of my mother's human self aching for us. You can't have that kind of a connection without, I would look into her eyes because we sat in silence so often, and everything was in her eyes, and there was suffering there, and there was, the longing to be with us, with her family. And here she was again. Her worst fear her whole life since she was 7 was being separated from her family. She never wanted that to happen again. She never left her hometown. She didn't like to travel. She always wanted her daughters to come back to the hometown to live. And then here, her worst fear played out. She was with us, but apart.
Wow.
And that was a heartbreaking thing for me.
And I've had to, over the course of doing the podcast, I've had to find ways of like not allowing, it's always in my mind, like I don't want the score to detract from what's being said, because the story and what they're having to say has to take precedence. This isn't about me like creating these crazy scores that like take up all the space, but the way that I've been recording them, like Jason every so often, he's like, man, I really want to help you with this. So if you could send me a few music pieces, I can put them in there for you. So you're not having to shoulder all the work. But I'm like, well, it's hard now because I literally sit down and I write the piece while I listen to it. I wouldn't be able to compose all of these pieces of music because I think most of them have like up to 6 at least. And there's no way if I had to sit down and actually write these out, so they're all improvised. I don't know if anybody realizes that, but I'll sit there and I'll listen to a bit that I had pre-decided that I wanted to write music there. So I'll listen through the whole interview once or twice and I'll take notes and be like, that was a point where I was like, that could totally, and I'm sure I actually had somebody, I'm going to butcher his last name because I can't think of how it's spelled in my head right now, but Bob Crumbs Hansel, or that's, if I just butchered your name, I know you listen. I'm really sorry about that. But he had commented on one of the posts that I had left up about a new episode, and he had said, man, and I can already hear the custom music playing. It's, thinking about what the episode is going to be about. And I was like, man, that is such a meaningful comment to hear, to think that. And it's so funny because there's points when I listen back to some of these episodes where I'm like, I could have totally put a piece of music there. And if people are getting kind of trained to when all of a sudden, like, somebody lobs up the stakes that are about to happen, that's usually a really great place for me to put music. Where, like, what's a good example? I mean, just like being like, yeah, and then this is where the story gets really good. Like whenever like that kind of moment happens in the story process, it's like, yes, okay, that all of a sudden the music just kind of drifts in and you're like, oh, here we go. Love those moments.
Like I can get a degree. I can kind of, I can understand this and then get some kind of degree in what's happening to me. And that was my conviction. It was for me, it was survival. It wasn't because my body was occupied, it was not, it was like I was I felt like I was a hostage. So I was like, okay, this is, I don't have a choice. And I think I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and there was this weird sculpture on my desk on the kitchen table that my roommate had, and I one day I just asked her like, what's going on with that sculpture, and she was like, oh, that's my sister. She went to Pacifica. She had to do it for her like class. It was like
dropping into his life and basically updating, finding out what's going on with him.
Yeah.
Did you have a need to know what was going on with him? Was there something in you that was saying, I want to know what's happening with my old friend?
No, I really didn't. When this started, I think we hadn't spoken at all in like 4 or 5 years. It had been years since we spoke. So no, I didn't think about him anymore. I was so happy in my own life. I was completely moved on from that whole.
And so I'll sit there and I'll get kind of a baseline of what I want to compose, and then I just hit record and I just play to it, and I just try to allow the music to like really speak to what I'm feeling the emotion is of that moment. And I just really allow the music to write itself. And I feel like I've listened to other podcasts where they add music in that same way, or they try to do that. And I'm maybe a little bit partial or a little bit biased or a little bit full of myself saying this, but unless they're really intuitive about the music choice that they're adding, or they have their own production team that's doing exactly what I'm doing, it doesn't seem to like fit quite as well. It doesn't seem like it's tailor made, and I think that's what makes the music feel so cohesive in our podcast, is that they're literally tailor made. I'm going through my library of sounds, and I'm picking the one that feels most appropriate, and I'm like improvising the piece of music that wants to be said right then and there, that fills the gaps or that weaves into the conversation perfectly. And so I don't know. I hate to sound so full of myself that like, oh yeah, this is something like, but
you've done it beautifully, and it's something I so much look forward to when I, hearing the finished production after the interview's been done and commentary and all that. Then I hand it off to you, and then we have you add the music, and then I don't hear it again until the final product is out. And I always look forward to hearing what you've done with it musically, because it's so spot on, and it highlights what the person is saying without getting in the way, without trying to be like, oh, here's now the music, you gotta notice me.
Yeah.
Like, no, let the music sit in the background and help to tell the story. So with myself as a as a musician and the son of a musician, having that element to our podcast was that piece that was needed.
Yeah.
And now I know that, I didn't know I didn't know your process up to this point for how you were creating all that music. And that, I mean, if you're looking at maybe 6 custom pieces per episode and 30 episodes or so, I mean,
yeah, I got a
you
huge
can do the
library all of a
math,
sudden
man.
of music.
That's a huge library of music. Right. So,
and so there's really
I know
cool,
how that,
and it's kind of like kind of evolved over time, but it was like I was listening to a podcast that I had heard them do this, where they all of a sudden just brought in a little music that like really touched on it, and then they just trailed off the conversation and they just let the music speak for a minute, and I'm like, oh my god, that's totally what I'm going to do. That was so beautiful the way they just executed that, and they just opened this whole door of like how we could create space in the episode, and that there's so many beautiful ways that we've taken the music and allowed for time to digest what has just been said, or to just free up the space to just give the listeners a break for a few seconds. There's been such cool ways that we've done it, and that just like the lead up, like the kind of soft bringing it in, and then like usually when I kind of trail it off, I'll have the next bit of dialogue start right as it's about to end, and so that they kind of like weave, and it's just a weave. It's just totally woven into each other. I think that there is a lot of comfort in that. It's seeing that it not only like is helping you to understand the truth of what's happening, but also like presenting it to you in a way that's deeply meaningful, that shows that it knows you and that it cares about you. And I think that's really kind of sweet.
And regardless of how dreams come forth from us or enter us, in the end, the dream is within us one way or another.
All these little things that you probably don't even think about. people listening. Well, they are actually really intentionally done on our side of things, just to try to give you guys the best listening experience that we can possibly offer you. And this really is like every episode is very, very we try to honor these stories as truthfully and as deeply as we can. And yeah, we don't take for granted the fact that, people keep bringing us these really beautiful and impressive stories, and that they entrust us with them. I mean, it's a huge honor for both of us. And yeah, we try to create these as like these odes to these people's lives, to their dreams, to their struggle and triumphs. And I know personally the couple stories that I've shared, like to have those stories so beautifully put together. It's just, they feel cemented in a way that like has exalted them within myself. That is really quite profound. And I feel like based on what a lot of people have said about their experience being on the show, that it's kind of done the same thing for them, where it feels like it's taken this huge story of their life and it's cemented it in such a way that it's, I don't know. I'm totally losing what I'm trying to say here, but it like, I don't know if you can help me out here, but it's like, it's just exalted in this way, that this thing that has meant so much to them, that has been years of their life, or, was one of their biggest challenges that they overcome. And now they have this beautiful thing that tells the whole story, that is meaningful and it's deep and it's true. And to just have something like that I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, turned it into a work of art.
Right, it had that. That's exactly it. It's a piece of it's a piece of art. It's a piece of love. It's like, it's taking, it's kind of like how I feel about making music that comes from a place of pain. Like you metabolize that, and now you have this beautiful thing that came out of that maybe some people listen to and are like, God damn, dude, you must have been suffering to like write something like that. But to you, it's like, no, dude, you don't understand. Like, for me to have been able to express this so truthfully, like, it almost feels like it takes that out of me a little bit, and I can see it here, and I can honor it for what it was, and it doesn't have to live so fully in my body anymore.
Yeah, much like when you talk about a dream, it's sharing it with someone and getting their feedback and just having them express their interest in it. It helps to externalize it in a way that so that you don't have to carry it around with yourself alone. A lot of these stories that we've done, people have told me that they were carrying these they were carrying it around with them, and they hadn't really shared it with anyone, so it felt like it was theirs alone, to carry the load, and there was Aaron, and there was Jonathan,
Matt.
who, Matt, Matt especially, I mean, not especially, but he was another person who told us that it was cathartic for him to share what had happened to him, and to be able to kind of release it at once, but also to allow it to come back to him in a new sort of way.
Whether we know it or not, we all hold deep stories, secret stories, like hidden dreams inside of us. And when we speak them out to the world, which I think is what the world actually wants, great things can happen. The Dreams That Shape Us podcast, Steve and Jam, are men that have provided that space for the old wisdom to come forth. And so my experience in sharing my story, the antelope and the thawing of the glacial heart, was a big release for me, and also a way to express and gift something deep in my heart that I didn't know where to speak into the world. They provide the spaciousness, the listening, and the care, and the understanding of the dream realm and the mystery realm that allows these truths to come forth. And so I totally value that. And as a result, my life has been changed in speaking that story, and more stories are welling up. Our relationship with wild nature is something that I think about and experience every day. And the more that I can bring that into the world through the strange collaboration that's happened in my life, the more I will be happy. In revealing the story of the antelope and the thawing of the glacial heart, I was followed up by dreams of my father, who died when I was young, that I hadn't had in a long time. And so just by having the ability and space to speak that story so completely and clearly, because of Steve in particular, a completion happened for me, a follow-up dream of my father appearing for me, and that touched my heart. My experience is the more that we allow and bring dreams to presence and into life, the more they invest a needed energy into the world that's gone missing. It's like adding a mythic storyline, a different dimension, an old wisdom into the fray. And this is exactly what the podcast, Dreams That Shape Us, has done. So good work, Steve, Jam. You guys are awesome.
You know, we know some of the guests who've been on our show, people have heard them and said, I relate to them in a way, and they've gone to them professionally, like, you know, to hire them for their services. We know that's happened with Catherine Lawson, that, you know, there are people who've experienced trauma, and they're now going to Dr. Lawson to, for her as a trauma specialist. So those ways that this thing is, I mean, we keep coming full circle, but that's the term that really applies to what we're doing. It's not just for us, but for the people who've been the guests on our shows and the people who are listening to them. This thing is coming around for them in a way so that it can let go of what's been before, and then it launches off into something new for them. It's happening for us individually, you know, personally, and it's also happening for them. So that truly is when
I feel like all of us like have this habit of like thinking that our stories are specific to us, and like what we've gone through is like only we've gone through it. And I just know that speaking our stories out loud, and especially to other people, is so deeply healing for people receiving it also, because then they realize that they're not so alone in their own thing. They're like, oh my God, I like totally know exactly what you're talking about. Like before me and him got on this call right here tonight, we got into this whole dialogue about something, and I'm like, dude, I feel like you're like in my body right now, because everything you're just talking about, I like feel. And it's been like a story in my life for so long. And that's the same way, like, I mean, every episode, I personally received so much from hearing these stories, to seeing the type of life and the type of beauty and the type of struggle, and knowing that we're all in it together. Like, obviously I don't share the exact same struggles as so many people, but people still struggle, you know. I'm not the only one out here having a hard time, you know. And there's this at the same time, there's so much to receive that maybe you're not aware of, that maybe you're struggling with this certain thing, like maybe with my Grinch story. Maybe you really resonate with the fact that maybe you also don't feel like you'll ever be worthy of your own love. Maybe you heard that in that story and you were like, oh my God, dude, like what? That's so true for me too. Maybe you heard that and you were like, dude, yes, exactly. But you didn't know that you could go on this whole crazy journey, that you could, have a chance at like demolishing that. And yeah, there's so much to receive that will inspire you further. And there's also so much validation in our shared humanity by hearing other people's stories that I feel really is a balm and is really necessary. That we all need to hear the stories, because everyone's so closed up and they're so shy about sharing their struggles because they think people are going to use it against them, or whatever the hang up is there, which is probably valid. But there is so much medicine in hearing these stories and sharing these stories. And I think all of our guests who have shared something that they knew wanted to be said, but they had a lot of trepidation in sharing it. Those seem to be the stories that the people who shared them walked away going, that actually like felt like such a release that I didn't even know that I needed. To be able to say that so truthfully and so fully, like that really shifted something really profoundly within me. And I can attest to that with the Grinch story and with the father wound story. And to give you one more little tidbit, when me and Jason sat down to record the father wound episode, that wasn't even what we had planned on doing that night. I think we went into that episode planning on mutually sharing about how the father archetype and kind of the anima figure, like the relationship between there or something like that. Yeah, we had we did not go into that at all, but I came there with a couple of dreams that had the father and the woman, and as Jason just gave me the floor to speak at length about a couple of things, and then we stopped at one point and we're like, oh man, this is getting a little crazy. And I'm like, you know what, I have a really cool way of just ending this if we want to kind of like find a way to like wrap this all up. And the other thing that's crazy about that story in particular was that I didn't even associate those dreams with the father wound before walking into that. If you remember the moment where Jason was like, yeah, it's a wound delivered by the father. And I say, yeah, it's kind of my father wound.
Her eyes are nailed shut. So, and it's a wound delivered by the father.
Yeah.
So
so that's
can't
like my
see.
father wound.
Yeah.
It's like very, like that moment right there was actually a light bulb going off in my head that I didn't even have going into the conversation. And so then the whole story, the way it unfolds, is like epiphany after epiphany to me, even though it sounds like I know what I'm talking about. Like you bringing up the Death Star and what that meant for me, all of those things that I had to say about what the Death Star meant for me, that was in the moment. And I'm just like, at the end of that episode, like you hear it in me, like I voice it a couple of times where I'm just like, wow, dude, like walking into this, I had no idea. Like I feel like I understand this story so much deeper now. And so many of the interviews that I've led, like I try not to know everything about the story so that I'm kind of surprised. Like we just I tell the people going into it, I'm like, I just want you to trust your feelings on things. And if you feel like you need to talk about something, to just say it. I want this to kind of shape itself. I want the spirit inside of you to like speak the stories truthfully, and wherever we go is where we go. And I want to trust that, and I want you to trust that. And so sometimes like we touch on things that I had no idea that's where the episode was going to go. And both of us are kind of surprised at the end of it. But yeah, man, it's crazy.
And those are the dreams that shape us, and the ways that we have been touched by this too, man.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
That's
so
why
I'm going to try not to get too shrieky for the sake of your listeners. That's good. You have like 45 seconds of me just being like, what? No. What? No. Oh my gosh. What?
Yeah.
No. What?
Yeah.
What? What? Oh my gosh. Wow.
Wow.
What? What? Oh my gosh. Wow.
Wow.
So that's, wow, crazy. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Wow. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to yet another episode of the Dreams That Shape Us podcast. And thank you for listening and supporting us and being here with us through it all over the last 2 years. On behalf of Jason and myself, really thank you. Thank you, seriously. Your support has meant so much to us over the last 2 years, and the way that we're watching this thing grow right now is so amazing, and we're so ready for the ride ahead. And we have some truly beautiful, deep, profound human stories coming up for you in 2023 that I'm so excited about. Can't even tell you. We're continuing this as season 3 is coming up. So we look forward to providing you with even more beautiful stories for all of your tender hearts out there. We love you. Seriously, we love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And as always, if you want to support this podcast, please share this with your networks, with your friends, with your family, whoever it is that you think would really benefit from hearing these stories. Please pass them on. Not for my sake, for the sake of the beauty that these hold. And if you have it in you to support us by going over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, if they have a rating and review system, I can't even tell you how much it helps to have reviews on the podcast. At this moment in our growth, it's just a necessary evil that it is a benchmark that encourages people to truly take our podcast seriously. So if you love this podcast and you've been listening religiously for the last however long you've been listening, please, if you could take a moment to go and leave a review at Apple Podcasts, I would be so deeply honored and would just love to hear what you have to say about. And if you could leave a written review, that would be ace. So from the bottom of my heart, once again, thank you so much. And on behalf of Jason DeBoard, I am Stephen Ernenwine, and we are here to say nighty nights. Ow! Ha ha. Ha ha.